a job that's going to sustain you for the next 6, 7, 8 months when you're about to be slow. All of those things are critical to know, but they're also critical to make sure you're making realistic decisions from, and not letting your optimism overshadow what otherwise needs to be realistic. You received the money when you needed to, and there was just no stress or drama. You can actually organize your cash flow to feel no stress or drama. Those are the types of things that you really got to be able to prepare for. And if you have all of your numbers locked in place under the most perfect conditions with some variances that are very common to make 200 grand, is two totally different scenarios. I'm not here to tell you to take one versus the other. I'm just saying you should definitely know the timing of why your cash flow in your construction project flows. Because that timing is exactly going to tell you the answers in the example I gave you between investing 100 grand to make 200 or 500 to make 200 on a project. Known is, if these things happen, what is the impact to my cash flow? And since we all know cash flow is the most critical thing in any construction project, any construction business, really any business, cash flow is the most important thing. If there's no cash in the business, you're going to significantly hurt. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to jump right into it. Why should you never improvise with cash when it comes to construction? Whether it's cash, cash flow, the process, who knows? I want to take this approach so you can think about this from the standpoint of, if your goals of being in business or leading your business is to provide a service or a product to your customers, to solve a need or solve a problem, be a solution to something that you're trying to do. In the world of construction, that's going to be building something, or that's going to be fixing something, or providing a service around the construction of it. If that goal is also to help your team, your family, and their families provide an income from themselves, provide value and capability for them to provide for their family and see their goals with it. And if your goal is to make money and maybe even sell your business one day, this is why you need to listen to this video. My name is 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I'm the founder and CEO of Mobilization Funding. And today we're going to talk about all those things. There's going to be 5 or 6 pitfalls that you want to avoid. We're going to go through each one. We're going to talk about the tools and the information you can use to make sure you're never improvising on cash flow. So let's get right into it. First is the danger of wishful thinking. Now, what do I mean by wishful thinking? So let's think about it this way. Optimism is excellent. Unrealistic is no good. So being optimistic, yes. Being unrealistic, no. There's a fine line between the two. I'm an optimist. I can see the positive in anything. I'm also someone who wants to say yes to everything. But you know what? In the lending business, that can go really bad for you. So I have someone on the other side who really makes those decisions. I can see a lot of positives. I can see the benefits, but you have to have someone or a process in your organization to make sure they're being realistic. And you need to make sure you listen to those folks. How does that show up in the construction world? Taking any project you want and being optimistic because, hey, it's this new customer. We have a great opportunity with them. Or, yes, it's $5 million contract. It's going to be amazing. Or whatever the right size of the contract is for you and your business. Those are optimistic things. Now, being realistic is that $5 million worth of work that you know how to do? You've done it before. It's going to be simple for you to do, easy for you to do. It's on a similar project in a similar geography with the similar people and folks that you know and trust on a cash flow cycle that you know and trust? Or are you biting off a $5 million project that's bigger than you've ever done before? You're analyzing it and assuming it's going to go exactly like every other project you have been on, with the exception that it's a new customer, new people, new geography. It's a scope of work that you're familiar with, but on a project you've never done before. For example, it's not an office building, it's a condo tower. Things like that are where the line is drawn between being optimistic and being realistic. And if you choose to avoid all of those scenarios and you don't plan for any of them, those are the ways you get yourself in trouble. Because the optimist sees, I bid this work. I know I'm going to make this profit. It's a great job for us, a great customer for us, because no matter what, you're seeing the end result be the outcome that you want, whether it's new customer, more money, great profit, a job that's going to sustain you for the next 6, 7, 8 months when you're about to be slow. All of those things are critical to know, but they're also critical to make sure you're making realistic decisions from, and not letting your optimism overshadow what otherwise needs to be realistic. All right, item number 2, never gamble with financial improvisation. What is financial improvisation? That means winging it. Don't wing it. If you're not planned out and you don't have a perfect plan that has some wiggle room in it and some variances, then you're winging it. And I don't mean to sound like you're just being willy-nilly or you don't understand, but if you don't really know exactly how the cash is going to flow into, onto, and off of that project, and then ultimately end up back in your account, to your suppliers, to your customers, to your suppliers, to your payroll, to your vendors, it's really critical that you figure those things out. If not, I like to say that you're winging it. Now, are you really winging it when it comes down to like you have no idea what you're doing? No, I don't mean like that. But I do mean the lack of total awareness on what you're going to spend, where you're going to spend it, who you're going to spend it with, what period of time you're going to spend it for, how you're going to pay them, how you expect to get that cash back, what you're going to do with that cash. That's the extreme, the other end. That is where you can be really protected and really guarded. Now, conventional wisdom says, well, why wouldn't everyone do that? Truth is, you should. Everyone should do that. You should go into every project that way. But why doesn't that happen? Well, it doesn't happen because a lot of times you don't have the tools or the information or the knowledge within your company. These are not things that you have to know yourself all the time. Someone in your organization does, and you just need to be able to trust them. So it's not that you don't want to do those things or that you don't have the ability to, it's that you might not just have the capability within your organization and you don't have the tools needed. So what's important is you get those tools, you get that capability, because when you go into a project knowing exactly how the money is going to flow from you to the project, from the project back to you, to your vendors, to your employees, it is an entirely different experience that is exactly what you can feel when everything kind of goes right on a project. You're not quite sure all the things lined up perfectly. Vendors could get paid when you needed to. You received the money when you needed to. And there was just no stress or drama. You can actually organize your cash flow to feel no stress or drama under the likely conditions that you know and you're aware of. Because look, let's face it, on a construction project, there's very few scenarios that are just going to jump out at you that you've never seen, heard, read about, or shared a story with before. What do I mean by that? Look, there's going to be design flaws. There's going to be design changes. We've all heard of those before. Maybe you've never experienced them, but it's a possibility in certain projects. There's going to be change orders, changes of scope. We've heard of those. There's going to be different trades on the project. Some are good, some are bad. Some can screw up the whole project, which trickles down to all of you. Do you know every trade that's on the project? Have you worked with them before? Have they worked on these projects? There's a lot of variables. There's another one. Then there's your own workforce. Have they worked on these projects before? Are they driving farther than they normally drive? Are they going to be there on time? What's the project manager like on this job versus others? There's so many variables, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Those are the types of things that you really got to be able to prepare for. And if you have all of your numbers locked in place under the most perfect conditions with some variances that are very common, then you can plan and execute and make some changes and adjustments when those types of scenarios I just talked about jump out. All right, number 3, never discount the importance of the cash flow timing. What do I mean by that? Well, look, in a perfect world, if you could go onto the project, every vendor, every employee, anything you needed to do, you could pay exactly when you were paid, then timing would be perfect. That's called ideal. You do everything you want, 100% on credit, including your own employees, overhead, everything. And then when you get paid, you pay out each person. Every time you're paid, by the way, you also have profit in there so you can handle it's perfectly balanced no matter what month, no matter how much work you do. You get the exact amount of money that you need, that you owe, plus some profit for yourself. Well, obviously, hopefully you're smiling right now because that scenario does not exist. For any of you that does have that scenario, never change it. Work for those customers under those circumstances as often and as much as you possibly can, because that's called a unicorn. So for the rest of us who deal with the rest of that scenario, you must figure out exactly what I'm talking about. And that is the cash flow timing. How that money is going to flow onto the job, meaning your payroll. How often are you making payroll? Is it weekly? Okay, great. Do you have 2 or 3 people on the project to start? Do you have supervision allocated to that project? Is your supervision allocated to multiple projects? How much equipment do you need to put on the project? What are the terms for your equipment vendors? Do you need to pay them when you are paid, or are you actually making deposits? Is there a monthly fee? Is that monthly fee due on the 15th, but you're not paid till the 30th? Actually, you can't bill to the 30th and pay to the following 15th. How much of that equipment are you going to have to float? What about the material vendors? If you order on the 1st or 5th of the month, are they going to allow you to pay them on the month when you're actually paid from that contract or that period of the contract? Like, in other words, if it's January 5th and you invoice for January and you're now paid March 15th, if you order something on January 5th, even though you're not paid till March 15th for January, will your vendor allow you to pay then? Or are they going to be looking for that money on February 5th? There's so many scenarios. All of these things you guys have lived with, you understand, and you know what I'm talking about. This is the timing that I'm talking about, because if, for example, your vendor, if when you order, you need to pay them 30 days later, versus your vendor that you order in a certain period will allow you to pay them 30 days after you bill it, that's a totally different scenario. If they want 30 days directly from the time you order it, different scenario again. What if they require a deposit? What if there's long lead times? What if you can't bill for material till it actually shows up on the job? Therefore, you can't bill it for another period. Look, we've gone through these scenarios. I could talk at them ad nauseum. You get the picture. That timing is so critical to understand. That timing can literally be the difference between you having to invest 15, 20, maybe 30% of the costs associated to that job on the project. What do I mean by invest? I'm talking about reaching in your pocket, taking your costs, 30% of the total cost of the job has to go on that job before you receive money, before you're actually cash flow positive. Or it could mean as much as having to have 50, 60, 70% of the cost of the job invested onto that project before you are paid or cash flow positive. Why is that critical? Well, let's just take $1 million job that has $800,000 of cost, and you're going to make 200 grand. Most people would say, you know what, 20% margin on $1 million job, that's awesome, no problem. And matter of fact, even if you have retainage, 5 or 10% retainage, you probably could still make that project work. Okay, well, if you look at it from just a pure finance perspective, there's risk on that job, execution risk, credit risk, meaning customer's going to pay you, developer's going to pay you, design changes, all those things that could provide risk, okay? So you have performance risk and you have credit risk. Now, let's just say that you only needed to put in $100,000 of your own money out of that $800,000. Over the period of time, you were going to be paid that $1 million and effectively end up making 200 grand. Well, conventional finance would tell you you invested $100,000. You also invested your time, resources, and energy, because there's opportunity cost in all of those things. And you end up turning out at the end of a certain period of time, you made $200,000. Okay, no problem. Let's take the same project, $1 million project. But this time, you have to invest $500,000 of the $800,000 into the job before it's cash flow positive. What does that mean? That means you're actually taking $500,000 of cash or debt financing, something. You're putting it onto the job to make that same $200,000, assuming all goes smooth and goes well. There's 2 different credit risks there. Investing $100,000 and all your resources and assets, including your people, to make 200 grand is one set of credit. Investing $500,000, your resources and your people and the opportunities that you might have otherwise to make 200 grand is two totally different scenarios. I'm not here to tell you to take one versus the other. I'm just saying you should definitely know the timing of why your cash flow in your construction project flows, because that timing is exactly going to tell you the answers in the example I gave you between investing 100 grand to make 200 or 500 to make 200 on a project. Either one can work, but you must know, you should know how much money you're investing, because there are two different risk profiles, two different credit risks and performance risks and opportunity costs to your business. Number 4, never underestimate your project costs. Look, I think everybody's probably learned their lesson in the last 3 or 4 years, especially post-COVID. Longer lead times, price fluctuations, material costs are still on the rise. I'm talking to friends of mine that are in the real estate development world who literally can't do a project the same that they used to do before. They're trying to get rent increases for projects. They're trying to get with their customers. They just literally can't. The math doesn't work anymore for deals that used to work all the time. And it all has to do with material cost and construction costs. So never underestimate those costs. How does that show up if you're in the trades? Well, it shows up assuming that you know you can get a certain price or a certain range. You want to make sure that you know what pricing you're going to get. If you're doing jobs that have higher material costs than others, then you want to make sure you can lock your prices in. You can risk adjust for those, assuming like if your start times don't work, if you have your price locked into a certain date and that date correlates to when your project's going to start, and that's when they've given you the date to start, no problem. But do you have terms in your contract that if that project date gets pushed back, you're able to charge for that, or there's a delay cost or a restart cost, or you can, worst case scenario, you can't charge for it, but the pricing you fixed for your cost structure to those materials has to go up, then you have to be able to bill for that as a change order. There's many, many things you can do, but those are the types of risks and you need to be managing and paying attention to. And that's what I'm talking about when I say know your pricing before you're going in there. Don't take that extra risk. Don't assume that you can get whatever price you need to. Also, make sure you're using multiple vendors. Oftentimes in our world at mobilization funding, we see a lot of customers tend to gravitate to one vendor or the other. The usual reason they gravitate to them is because they get the best price. It's also because they might have the best terms. Sometimes they have the best price and terms, all of which are fine. But what's important is if that vendor all of a sudden changes or that relationship changes, you want to have a plan B. And in these type of scenarios, when things happen, you want to make sure you have a good relationship with another vendor, at least one alternative vendor for something that you may need, because you're going to need the terms and the supply costs to be exactly the same or at least favorable to you in some manner that you'll able to quickly make an adjustment without hurting yourself, the project, or the timing. This one, number 5, we beat to death all the time. And what it is never skip early cash flow forecasting. Literally, use your project cash flow tool. Find one. There's one on our website at mobilizationfunding.com. Your accountant should have a project cash flow tool for you. You can probably just Google finance cash flow tools, project cash flow tools for construction, and hopefully something comes up. Whatever one you want to use, find one that you can use, that you're comfortable with, that will give you the details and information you need exactly, which is how much money am I going to have to invest of my cost on this project? How much money am I going to make? What happens if my terms change, both supplier side? What if my labor changes? What if I have to shift all of a sudden to contract labor versus direct labor, or vice versa? What if my customer pays me in 45 or 60 days instead of 30? What if I have a design change on the project that has nothing to do with me but halts the project and there's a month gap in the middle of the project and therefore no money flows from the project? What happens if that happens in the first month? What happens if it happens in the 4th month? These are the types of cash flow, early cash flow modifications and designs that you can put in place that this cash flow tool will tell you and show you so that you can know eyes wide open what your risks are going into these projects, because you're very aware of all these type of things that can happen. But what's not often known is, if these things happen, what is the impact to my cash flow? And since we all know cash flow is the most critical thing in any construction project, any construction business, really any business, cash flow is the most important thing. If there's no cash in the business, you're going to significantly hurt, and that pain train is going to be real. So what we are going through here is understanding that early in the project so you can take care and figure out all of the things we've discussed so far in this video. It's going to give you the information and knowledge you need that you can perfect exactly how to execute your project the way you want to, with the team you have, with the vendors you have, for your customer, for the type of project they have. That is what's key. So never underestimate figuring out this cash flow early, and make sure you're using project cash flow tools to design that. We have one on our website. It walks you through the whole thing. We'll even walk through it with you to show you what it means and how you can make changes. Whether you need a loan from us or not is totally irrelevant. It's a process we go through all the time with people, and it costs you nothing. But you can also do it with your accountant if you don't want to talk to us. Most of your construction accountants can give you all kinds of project cash flow tools. And if they can't, find an accountant that can. Most accountants that specialize in construction will be able to help you. A regular accountant is not built for construction. All right, to summarize the 5 points we went through, I'm going to tell you a quick story. This is a story we actually lived with a customer. This happened in 2017. We actually made all of these errors ourselves in our own lending business, but they also were errors that we learned a lot from, and many of which I just illustrated. So we had a contractor working all the way across the country. There's your geographical difference. Were we familiar with that area? Not at all. Never worked with it before. We also were working with a contractor who had grown significantly fast. They actually had $10 million worth of work contracted with one general contractor across 3 separate projects. One was a mixed-use retail. One was actually a residential complex, like an apartment complex, and the other one was an aftercare facility. We thought, great, 3 perfect projects, all designed well, looking good. There's the optimism. The next piece of optimism was they're all with the same customer, the same general contractor. We thought that was also great, because if the same general contractor was on board, then they'd be on board across the way. We assumed all 3 projects were going to go great, which you do. We also had not, at this point in the game, mapped out project cash flows. We went into the project cash flows using the bid sheets that our contractors used. If they said they were making 20%, we assumed they were probably making close to 20%. If they weren't, they might have been 15, maybe it was 25, but if not, they can make up the efficiencies. We cared a lot more about the contract value than we did the actual cash flow. Mistake number 2. Next, we had thought, again, the general contractor working across, one customer working for one general contractor was actually a benefit to us, and it was actually a detriment. So what happened? Well, okay, so let's go through it. We didn't pre-plan the cash flow for any of the projects. We assumed that the contractor, who had been in business a long time, and we did do a site visit, we had lots of employees and people running there, we assumed that everything was good and smooth. We assumed that the fact that they were growing fast was actually a good thing. We assumed that that growth was doing nothing more than helping them, but it actually was hurting them. And we also assumed that working for one contractor was a good thing, as long as they had other projects as well. What we learned was actually working for one general contractor across 3 projects is really bad if one bad thing happens on a project, because as soon as it does, they can hold up money across all 3, and they did. And one bad thing happened, slowed money down on one project, which slowed money down on 3 projects, which also hurt the actual general contractor. And as the general contractor got hurt, the hurt came downhill. And of course, that downhill hurt not only went to all the different contractors, but it definitely hurt our contractor for the scope of work they were doing. Again, not on one project that had the problem, but on all 3. that money started to get pushed around. And where did this all end up? It ended up with people not getting paid. It ended up with money being slow. It ended up with the general contractor filing bankruptcy, which a couple months later turned to the subcontractor filing bankruptcy, which turned into a big problem for mobilization funding at the time and our loan. So all of those things were lessons learned that I just articulated to you in this video. That's a real world lesson for a business that was going north of $15 million, that had $10 million worth of work spread across 3 separate projects that ranged between $2.5 and $4 million. And all of that turned into an epic disaster for everybody. So I hope you take these lessons to heart. I certainly did. I can promise you if we didn't, we wouldn't be here now, and I certainly wouldn't be telling you the story. I hope you liked this video. I hope it helped. I hope you took these lessons to heart. I hope you implement the project cash flow tool. If you found value in all this, please click subscribe, share the episode, share the information. Until next time, I hope to see you on Construction MF'ers podcast again. Have a great week, and God bless you.